Hi Liz, we spoke earlier on this week. How are you today? I understand congratulations are in order because you've just won the nomination to be the Liberal Democrat candidate for the Cotswolds.
Hi, Ranjan. Yeah, I'm good. Yes, that happened last weekend. So I'm looking forward to getting down and doing some work in the Cotswolds in the hope we might have an election quite soon. You never know.
Okay, well, speaking of getting down, let's get to it. I've got an excerpt here from a newspaper article from the wonderful Daily Mail, and I was just wondering what you think of all this. Judges reject challenge to Leveson 2 cancellation. Okay, so what does that mean? Leveson 2 cancellation.
Yeah, well, Leveson 2 is meant to be the sort of the next phase of the Leveson 1 public inquiry, which was really to do with dealing with the criminality that was exposed in Leveson 1, and it was such a huge inquiry. And so Leveson, as far as I'm concerned, cancelling Leveson 2 makes a mockery out of Leveson 1 in that there's no...
Just 1 second. Leveson 1, for those people who are possibly too young to even remember, that in 2011 the phone hacking inquiry was set up, and the judge was a man called Brian Leveson, I think. And not long after that, there were lots of riots in London, by the way. It was a strange summer. But so this was to do with the police were being paid by the newspapers, and the newspapers were hacking into people's phones, but they were also doing all sorts of criminal behaviour. Entrapment, people went to jail for selling cocaine that they were selling to journalists who were only asking to sell them the cocaine so that they could put it on the front page of the News of the World. So it was very much a News of the World thing, but also a Sunday Times thing and the Daily Mirror. And so all of these newspapers were up to no good, and the Guardian had done an investigation into this, which led to all of this. That was Leveson 1, and Leveson 2 was supposed to happen because there were court cases at the time, and they wanted to wait for the outcome of those court cases. But for some reason, Leveson 2 hasn't happened. Liz?
Yeah, well, in my mind, I think that the foreign media barons who own the media in this country had a lot to be scared of in Leveson 2, because it would have been holding them to account for the criminality that has been going on for decades, which has been manipulating key figures and in this country. So I think, when you think, if I put myself into a media baron's shoes and being scared of Leveson 2 coming through to expose what I've been up to, then I would think of some amazing self-imposed harmful pursuit for Britain to get itself stuck into, like Brexit, which is going to distract everybody from feeling angry about what these media organisations have been doing to our country for years, from exposing toe sucking of people by Fergie to all sorts of other shocking things that have basically meant that we have this invisible puppeteer who gets their way and manipulates us all via the news and other ways. So whilst all this Brexit stuff's been unfolding, I did go along to this judicial review, which happened about a month ago, and I think we're not surprised to hear that it was unsuccessful at this stage. I haven't read the judgment yet, but I'd be really interested to do so and see if there's any chances of getting leave to appeal. But the first thing that the Mail makes me sort of concentrate on is that they're saying there's only 4 victims of this that Leveson has ever been focused on, when actually we're all victims of this serious media intrusion. Every single one of us, whether that media spotlight has been brought on you is one thing, but also if you've believed that story, then you're also a victim. And I think we saw that recently with Vicargate, where you've sort of have believed somebody on television to be a vicar, and then you realise that you've been played, and that in itself makes you and me a victim. And so you should be angry about this, and you should really pay attention to this, because as far as I'm concerned, Brexit and Leveson are absolutely intrinsically linked. They are one and the same thing.
Okay, well, seeing as you've mentioned Vicargate already, I only came across it yesterday. It's blowing up. I think it's fair enough for me to put the Telegraph Vicargate story up there. I didn't see this being covered in any of the other newspapers, but the Telegraph have decided to give it a bit of space. What is the story? The word information operation springs to mind in terms of basically it's lying but propagandistic, it's fraudulent, and it's on a grand scale. And I should have actually done a screen grab of Emily Maitlis, who is the Newsnight presenter. They're trying to make it sound as though it's fair enough. You know, she's got views. She was on the show. No big deal. Where do you stand on all of this? What is Vicargate, first of all?
Well, this week, this vicar spoke on. I didn't watch the programme. I saw a clip on Twitter, and I do remember watching this vicar and thinking that it was, as in, I didn't really give it that much attention, but apart from thinking, gosh, it was a very sort of gushing account of, we pay MPs to make decisions for us, and I trust Theresa May because I'm a born and bred Conservative, whatever that is, and so therefore you should all be doing what Theresa May says, and that's what I got from it. And it's like, oh, for goodness sake, what on earth is this rubbish? But once it was disclosed that this person, Lynn, is actually an actress, and that she wore a dog collar, which we all, especially with May's father being a man of the cloth, it seems a very manipulative move to try and get people to sort of trust in me, into believing, May must be right, she's from the church, and it's all so much better for you. And it's definitely a manipulative move as far as I'm concerned. And the saddest thing for me is the BBC, who I've grown up to feel, for me, the BBC is like an armchair, or it was. You get in there, it's comfy, it's cosy, it's safe. What they're telling me is good, and it's completely undermined the public's trust in the BBC. Whether you believe in Remain or Brexit or whatever you want to believe, this fake lies, propaganda completely undermines people's faith in the BBC. And your first reaction, and I see a lot of this on Twitter, is scrap the BBC, we don't need to pay the licence fee anymore. Well, I'm more of the mind of, actually, I want to get my BBC back. I value the BBC as it was, and I don't want to be a puppet of Rupert Murdoch, who's wanted us to get rid of the BBC forever. He hates the BBC because people prefer to watch the BBC because there's no ads in there, and it's competition.
I get it. I mean, he has managed to take over the BBC as well, hasn't he? I mean, James Harding was in charge of the news after doing 6 years at the Times. Andrew Neil has obviously been on there for a long time, and I guess they get on. Their politics seem quite similar. And this woman here appearing on this show in this way, it's pretty bad. Well, we've gone from this particular tiny story in the Daily Mail. It's a very, very, it's I can't remember what page it's on, but it's not a big story, and there are no pictures, and they obviously don't really want anyone to know about it. 4 victims of serious media intrusion in inverted commas, like as if it's not true. Yesterday lost the High Court battle with the government over its decision to cancel the second part of the Leveson inquiry. They named the 4 people, brought a judicial review, but their case was rejected. And he said, I have a great deal of sympathy for the claimants. I can readily understand their bitter disappointment at what has eventuated, but I'm afraid that sympathy cannot override the law, and I see absolutely no basis for these grounds of claim. And then they say a couple of other things, but they say that, the government said in March that reopening the costly and time-consuming inquiry was not the right way forward. I mean, that's what's the word?
That's an opinion. That's not legal opinion. That's a personal opinion, which is not.
It's the sound of a kind of patriarchal state as well, isn't it? A sort of. Yeah. So then they talk about the the tape that everyone had relied on, in which David Cameron promises. And obviously, I was there with you at the hearing. Hardly anyone was there, but they went into the semantics of what is a commitment, what is a promise. Did he really promise? And then, even if he did promise, then is May bound by that? Would Corbyn be bound by that? And all of that sort of thing. So they were exploring every single way, and they used the word macro-political, didn't they? They said legitimate expectation. Do they have a legitimate just because the PM promised you, it doesn't mean that you should expect it to happen.
Yeah.
They went into that quite a lot. And there was a point at which the judge said, you're not seriously suggesting that the Prime Minister has to keep their promise. That was funny.
Yeah, not to people, only certain people.
Well, yeah, and then they balanced it off. So maybe the Prime Minister has to keep their promise to a donor in exchange for a referendum or a general election, favourable coverage, and the binning of the Leveson 2.
Yeah.
One judge at one point even talked about the merger with Fox, which was under Jeremy Hunt. It was being proposed. And I think that's what they were referring to. So these judges are on the ball. You know, I don't agree with what they're saying, but they're on the ball. Anyway, that is that. Let's skip through to this. This is just to give everyone a bit of a flavour of what the Daily Mail is like at the moment. Under their new editor, Geordie Gregg, they could only be described, not even Remain anymore, now they're just May.
Mayist, yes, completely Mayist, yeah.
Fox, it's your duty to back the PM. It's your duty. Like, so there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it, Fox? Because in May's deal, he basically becomes redundant. So, but maybe perhaps he's hoping to become the next Brexit secretary. I don't know. But he's had a nice life for the last 2.5 years, running around trying to get trade deals, which are which are impossible.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing in this. There's nothing in the deal that he would have argued for, and yet he's the one defending it.
Yes, well, he's very good friends with May, isn't he? So he's going down the loyalist Mayist line, and hoping to sort of get traction, I suppose. But I can't see that changing anything. But yes, they're still scaring with a no deal as a prospect. It's nothing. I mean, when you think about the impact of Leveson 2 being cancelled and the tiny amount of space that was put to that, and then this huge piece here, which is basically saying nothing, as in, I still want my friend to be Prime Minister, please back up.
Well, what's also interesting is that Leveson 2 would have affected the Daily Mail, and it would have affected the Sun and the Guardian as well, I guess. But the Mail are so close to Theresa May now that they are saying, well, thankfully Leveson 2 isn't happening. Let's talk about May. Let's talk about how amazing she is. In a minute, we'll get on to how, the real beneficiary of Leveson 2 is treating the person who served it up to him. But yeah, so it says 100 Tories could rebel. So that's fear. Then it's no bluff, no deal is real prospect. So another hard sell attack. And thankfully we have Quentin Letts, who is awful, but is a great writer. And what does it say? Quentin Letts sees Premier defend her deal, and then a little bit of humour.
Yeah.
Swished like two wipers on a tractor. I love it. He's so nasty, but I do actually really enjoy it. And here we go, full on.
Face the consequences of no Brexit at all. Oh my goodness, how terrible.
Sure. Okay, so that's hardline stuff. So here's the Guardian, who, don't really. It's as if they haven't really turned up to play this game. Campaigners fail in attempt to resurrect.
Given the fact that the Guardian really, the only reason Leveson happened in the beginning was the Guardian's work and pressure, and given that fact, why are they playing this completely Mr. Blobby disinterested line around this news?
Well, just to let you know, Jim Waterson, he was BuzzFeed before, and from what I understand, he has written for Guido Fawkes in the past, just in case there's any sort of, if you're wondering which way he might lean, He has, as a professional, worked for Guido Fawkes. And I understand that there's a guy called, I can't remember his name, who's like, he's at BuzzFeed now, and he came from Guido Fawkes.
Really?
Which is, so just another little, because you're allowed to have questions about BuzzFeed. Most people don't. They just go, oh, it's BuzzFeed. But, bit by bit, you sort of say, right. I think Jim Waterson has got some personal connections with Newsnight as well. But apparently you're not really allowed to talk about that because that's personal. So,
personal. Yeah, well, it is a very, very small world, isn't it? And it really, I suppose, comes down to whoever toes the line and works in with the system. And the system is the way that the system is. And Leveson wants to stop the system being the way that the system is. That's essentially it.
Well, who did what to who and at whose behest, right? That's what Leveson 2 is supposed to be about. Tom Watson did a good quote in the Guardian in May when they said there would be a judicial review, although they didn't cover the judicial review until after it failed. He said lots of those cases were settled out of court, and an inquiry you can't settle out of court. So all of those cases that settled would become relevant. It's almost like an NDA. So basically all of those people were silenced with gagging orders and NDAs and blah, blah, blah. So this is the press. The press gagging its own victims and then afterwards getting away with it. The press getting other... I know the Telegraph made people sign NDAs. Not in today's, but the Private Eye from a couple of weeks ago, they talked about how litigious the Telegraph are.
Right.
So that... looking at things from that angle makes things, I don't know, makes much more sense to realise that these are very powerful institutions.
Yes, and the institutions that work for their owners and their management themselves by using information or events that happen to manipulate the agenda, and that's what it's all about. And having been a victim of a violent crime on my son and being exposed to the media as a victim, I've kind of seen it from that end, and it's really difficult because when you are literally propelled into a situation where you think someone you love is going to die in a horrible situation, then you've got these media people outside your front door desperate to feast on you. And there is no one to look after you. You're just suddenly hurled into this absolute storm of hell, and then you're feasted on because you're a potential story to distract people and get things going. And that's how it works. Yeah, and yet they have to stop news to protect themselves, and that seems very, very unjust to me.
Yeah, fascinating, isn't it? The role of various people being paid to stop news from coming out. But someone who I know who works in public relations, or used to and is now an academic, in her book Trust, Power and Public Relations in Financial Markets, says that the role of the trust strategist, they created this term, they basically convince large corporations that they need to have someone on board to look after reputation and to put them on the board and things like that. But one of the expressions that she used in her book was the first rule of PR is not protect the client, it's protect the PR, protect the idea of PR. And that's really, it's almost like the guild. You've got to do that. So here's the Telegraph. So there they are reporting it. And again, they talk about Hancock saying the costly and time-consuming inquiry was not the right way forward. This is very similar to what was in the Mail. So it's as if they're just copy-pasting. Now, who would they be copy-pasting from? The government, I suspect. I wonder whether it's possible to get the government's press releases in this way, because we are paying for them, aren't we? Okay, so that's that one. We'll move on to the next. Ooh, okay. Juicy.
Leveson 2 binned.
Yeah, I'm just trying to... I'm having these problems with resizing it. So, yeah, sorry if you can't see this, but... Okay, here we go. And so this is in the Sun. And look above it, it says ipso regulators. So that's the self-regulation. Okay, so a judge condemned, so Leveson 2 binned, a judge condemned a press-hating former MP's aide, so that's the Lib Dem, yesterday for secretly recording David Cameron in a bid to force a second Leveson inquiry. What subterfuge! I mean, this is the height of hypocrisy, isn't it?
It's,
The
we can
thing is about surveillance.
you can attack people, but you can't.
Because, I mean, isn't the rule... I mean, I understand the rule is in investigative journalism, don't do anything that you wouldn't be happy to tell your mum that you did. You know, because it's all vague, isn't it? So, you know, whether that's raiding bins or, you know, nicking information from wherever. Okay, you broke the law, but it was for a good reason. This isn't taken into account at all here. You know, the fact that the Prime Minister has promised these victims, the McCanns, etc., and broken his promise.
Well, yeah, I mean, given that the government have not exactly been reliable with their promises to individuals in the past, you can understand why there probably would be an attempt to record whatever promises were given. But then to sort of say that promise is undermined by the fact there's legitimate proof that the promise was made it does really call into question where justice is at the moment. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, I once spoke to a fraud lawyer who told me, look, I'm not saying there's no fraud in the world. I'm just saying the government have to follow the rules when it comes to prosecution. And I accept that, yeah, sometimes the police can be lazy and, you know, go for an easy win, and that has, you know, consequences. But here, it's such a sort of high-profile thing, and the way it's just, they say binned, but, that's another expression that my friend in PR uses, organised silence. You know, just sort of ignore and, you know, put it on the sidelines, if that. No one's ever noticed this. It basically says that these people were very, very badly behaved, the people who were from Hacked Off.
They're basically projecting all of the badness back onto Hacked Off, and that's I mean, it's a very familiar tactic from the media, and that's how they do that, and move it around and sort of say, oh, just dismiss them because they're the bad one, project all the blame. And they've done it on Europe for years, and that's how it works, and it does work, as we know.
Okay, so we're talking about the link between Leveson 2 press inquiry into media intrusion, surveillance, all that sort of thing, entrapment, and Brexit. So there we have The Sun on page 2 saying that they've had Leveson 2 binned. And now, probably on the next page or the page after, this is the real money, isn't it? This is the Brexit stuff. So, very different to the Mail. Irish border, key clause was binned. Oh, that word again. So whereas it's good that Leveson 2 was binned, yeah, you know, terrible.
Yeah.
You know, I believe in a free press. I don't want Leveson 2, so that's what they're saying there. And here, Irish border key clause was binned. Tragic. Amazing what a few words can do. So here, PM tore up proposal on backstop. It could have sealed the perfect deal. Seal the deal. But she wanted to please EU. Terminator. So they won't call her a traitor, but it kind of almost looks like traitor, Terminator.
Yes, well, she's she's obviously letting down the owners of The Sun and the promise that probably was given, and this is the notification of that.
I mean, the other funny thing is that what's his name? Murdoch he sold Sky the other day to Disney. Oh, not to Disney, he sold Fox to Disney and Sky to Comcast.
Yeah.
Apparently News International will still keep the newspapers. So he's still going to keep the papers.
I know.
He's flushed most of the country down the toilet, but he'll just keep a couple of bits left over.
Just make sure he's still got the control. Yeah. So she's got a bit of a war going on. I think this war's been playing out for a while, actually. That she prefers the Mail, and I suppose I think it has a wider readership, doesn't it? And that's who.
I mean, it was a personality thing, right? Dacre was apparently got on okay with Gordon Brown, believe it or not. But yeah, because Dacre hated Blair. Apparently, you know, him and Brown were not too bad with each other, and then with May, I'm sure, yeah, they got along incredibly well.
So there's a bit of there's some tension obviously between the Sun and the Mail as to what they want. The Mail's happy with her slightly softer hard Brexit, and the Sun is now going for wanting no deal.
Yeah, and so here we go. So as the judge said, is a promise valid just because it comes from the Prime Minister, especially if it's made in private? And basically, the judge argued that it doesn't matter what the Prime Minister promises a victim of press hacking in private, but what the Prime Minister promises a donor is. So yesterday, so that's it. It's over. Well done. Woohoo! And then look at how Murdoch reacts. He does the Terminator, and then it isn't too late for the PM to salvage her Brexit deal, and the answer is staring her in the face. They come up with, basically, they want the backstop to be something that the UK can terminate whenever it wants, which is kind of the Gove thing, which is we can negotiate stuff, but then we can change it later, and we don't have to agree with anything that we negotiate, as if that's not going to affect the reputation of the country, and as if that's not going to affect the trading relationship in the future.
The EU will have completely tied that down, which is why she won't. That's why she doesn't want to publish the full legal advice, because she doesn't want the Brexiters to know that they are going into a turkey trap, and that's what that's all about. So, but obviously the Met happy with that destination, but the Sun is not happy with that destination because it's a loss of power to the United Kingdom, and it doesn't solve any of the problems about Brexit. It makes everything 100 times worse. We'll pay more money to get less access and wield less power on the global stage. So her Brexit is
so this is going for no deal, or to have her deal do no backstop. And as you said, she's not wanting anybody to see the legal advice, because then essentially people will have too much information that doesn't go in her favour.
Yeah, I mean, the legal advice will show that absolutely there is no way that unilaterally the UK can get out of the backstop and go off and be a global trader. So it basically kills unicorn Brexit, as I call it. I mean, unicorn Brexit is only possible if we crash out and then we become a rogue state because we've broken all international treaties and nobody will want to deal with this ever again. And they're the plain facts in front of us now. But they still want to keep unicorn Brexit alive, to keep the public pressure on Brexit. And they still believe that saying that no crashing out, no deal Brexit needs to be used as a threat against the EU, because it's like, oh, the EU won't want no deal Brexit. But in reality, the real loser for no deal Brexit, if it did happen, is the UK, and it would be horrendous. It would be really, really bad. A lot of people would die. So it is not. It cannot. No prime minister can really, or any government, any executive would decide to do that to its own people unless they were, really very, very, very nasty.
Okay, so here's an advertisement for the Times and Sunday Times. Investigative journalism. At this price, it's worth investigating. Get it? I think it's just it's so funny that comes out straight after lesson 2.
Especially as it says sale on the left as well. It's a sale. It's going at good offers. Going, gone. We'll go and investigate anything, but we won't investigate ourselves.
No, we've got one left here. Ooh, the big one. This is a big one. So this is the Times talking about Max Mosley, who funds Impress. So whereas that Sun thing that says Leveson to bin, just above it, it said regulated by IPSO, which is a self-regulating press regulator, which I think the board is the Daily Mail and the Sun. And so the Guardian and the FT haven't signed up to it, but some of these others have. But there's another one called Impress, and so lots of the alternative media and smaller media have signed up to Impress. I have no idea what Impress actually means, no idea, but I'm sure it's sort of trying to say we won't try and get people to sell coke and then tell the police and put it on the front page. Probably something like that, but I don't know. Personally, as a broadcaster, I don't really want to be regulated. If regulation means I don't put people in jail for selling coke that they didn't want to sell, I'll do that. But, I quite like saying what I want. Anyway, press regulated to take more of Mosley's movies. This is almost like a hit job on Mosley.
Yeah, well, it is. That was the clash of the titans, really. It's Mosley taking on the press because of his family exposure. So I don't know how many years ago that was, but and
you get reminded here. They tell you it was 2008.
2008. Okay, I thought it was further away than that. Yes. As to why anybody's interested as to what some of these people get up to, I don't know. But anyway, they also go on about his the leaflet that he produced in 1961, which is an incredibly long time ago, and seem to think that should write him off for the rest of his life to never be considered ever again, because he produced an emotional leaflet in 1961 when life was very, very different and the laws were very different.
Well, a lot more recently than 1961, the Sun accused many of the Hillsborough victims of pickpocketing at Hillsborough and other things. I mean, I've seen stuff in the Sun which I find disgusting. So that's very recently, and they don't want any regulations. So in the last paragraph, it says it was. Oh, by the way, for those of you, anyone that's got this far in this dry story about Max Mosley and press regulation, which would make you fall asleep, it was announced yesterday that the Leveson inquiry into press regulation and ethics, which reported in 2012, would not be reopened. Bam! It's amazing just to say a sentence that just doesn't even really make you want to read any further. But if you do, the High Court rejected an application by... Okay, at least they didn't do inverted commas. By victims of press intrusion to overturn the government's decision to cancel the second part of the inquiry. Full stop. Lord Justice Davis said he could see absolutely no basis for the legal challenge. So there you are. No basis for the legal challenge. I mean, this guy, Lord Justice Davis, absolutely no basis for the legal challenge. Well, what about the promise? What about the fact that he said it in Parliament? They don't go into the things that were said in the court in any way.
You just have to think about that. What if they hadn't recorded the promise? Then what would he be saying then? As in, oh, well, you said there was a promise, but we don't know if there's a promise because there's no recording of the meeting. So, yeah, I mean, it's absolute madness. And really the question that should be asked is what's best for the country, what's best for everybody. And that's why Leveson 2 should absolutely happen. And that's also why we should have a Mueller-style inquiry into what's gone on with our democracy, with Brexit, and all the other. There's been, I think, Cambridge Analytica have admitted that they've interfered in 3 elections in the UK, and that's
India they did as well. In India, they did. They swung it in India for Modi, although he was obviously doing well anyway. I think in Nigeria they lost, but yeah, they've done it around the world. Kenya, I think that's where Chris Wiley's predecessor died in Kenya, was killed in Kenya. Yeah.
Was killed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really scary stuff, and yeah, they put everybody to sleep with stories about the Jungle program, or to get people just not focusing on this. But I suppose until it intrudes on your life personally, for most people, it's of no consequence, and they just think, oh, I'll just carry on reading these headlines, and it's entertaining. But people should really start to make connections between Leveson and Brexit, because we are being controlled by a foreign-owned media, which is not good for the country, because it's not making the right decisions for this country. So, we're at threat of losing our BBC, our NHS, our welfare system, all because we're being manipulated by stories, which is quite scary.
We said that we'd finish at 1 o'clock, and 1 o'clock it is. So shall we, all things going well, continue with this type of conversation about what's going on in the news next week?
Absolutely. Let's do it again.
Okay. Great to see you again. Bye, Liz.
Next week. Bye.